Rebel camera. So you may have heard the Canon Rebel is a nice beginner camera, and then when you search for it on Amazon, like Canon Rebel for example, you get a whole bunch of different models, and it's really hard to tell what's going on. I mean, this is confusing even for people who are into the photography world. Okay, so 4000D, also known as the T100, T7, various T7 kits. This is pretty confusing. Oh, so the T7 is also the 2000D. T8i, like what is the I? Is this better than the T7? Is the I better? Okay, there's a T6 here, but I heard it's discontinued. We're going to compare all the Canon Rebel cameras. I'm going to put them on one table. Okay, here they are in all their glory. So for each model, we have the name of the camera. So the 300D that's what it was called in Japan, Asia, and it was called the Digital Rebel in North America and Europe. It was released in 2003. It had a resolution of 6 megapixels. It was 645 grams in weight, which is just over a pound. CIPA rating is the number of battery shots you can get on one battery before the battery is supposed to die. Frames per second, 2.5 frames per second, which is very low. It's how many photos you can take per second. So if you're doing something like sports or more likely taking pictures of your kids, you want a higher FPS. Autofocus points, 7 autofocus points. This is not a huge consideration, but it becomes a very important consideration if you're trying to use the camera for sports, action, and wildlife. So you want more autofocus points. DPAF, you'll notice, is pretty sparse. This is called a dual pixel autofocus. This is a much better autofocus technology that is especially useful for video shooters. We have the card column. Really only two options here. The older cameras use the compact flash card, and the newer ones use an SD card, which are, ubiquitous. They're everywhere. The LCD, which is the screen at the back of the camera, is it fixed or is it articulated? Touch is referring to if the LCD screen is a touch screen. The screen is the resolution of the screen at the back. Nothing much to consider here other than when you see like a really low number, like anything under the 920K mark, that's a sign of a super cheap screen and Canon trying to cheap out and save way too much money. Video is the maximum video resolution you can shoot. So for example, T8i is the first camera that can shoot 1080p video, and it can shoot it at an embarrassing 20 frames per second. You want to be shooting at least 24 or 25 frames per second if you're doing it if you're going to be showing the video to humans. Mic refers to whether the camera has a microphone jack or not. The new price is if it's available new as of today. Okay, so these numbers are going to be outdated in like a week probably after the Black Friday Christmas sales are over. But if it's available new today, these are the prices. And the used prices, I went all over eBay, local classifieds, to try and give you a ballpark idea of how much you can buy these US dollars on the used market. Now, these are going to fluctuate. You can find all sorts of crazy deals. Please don't take these prices as gospel. Okay, we're going to go through this table in order. You don't have to take it all in. I know it's a lot of numbers and letters on a screen, but let's go through it row by row, just to give you a sense of what Canon Digital Rebels are and which ones you should probably go for, in my opinion. So the first one they ever released was the 300D. At the top we have the 300D, which was the original Digital Rebel. Okay, this was actually the first DSLR I've used, and I actually have a video review of this DSLR using it recently. And the reason I made the video is because you can buy these for 20 bucks, $25 on the used market today. And if you know what you're doing with photography, and provided you're shooting in good light, you can actually get pretty decent results. Okay, funny enough, this camera that was released 17 years ago and is available for next to nothing can actually perform. So just to give you a sense of what's going on, you can absolutely get decent results with the cheapest possible Digital Rebel. Okay, so any other Digital Rebels that have come out since then are going to be just much better. That one was successful, so they kept pumping them out. First we had the 350D, which is known as the Rebel XT in North America, then the 400D, which is the XTI, and the 1000D, which is the XS, 450D, which is the XSI. These cameras are not too different. They have pretty poor resolution, LCD screens at the back. The screens are fixed, so they're not tilting or articulating. You cannot do any video with them. Okay, the megapixel counts have gone up, so it went from 6 to 8 to 10 to 12. The megapixel count is not too important. I think what's important is every time you see a different megapixel number, it means Canon is using a different sensor. And the actual sensor technology improves significantly over time. So it's definitely worth it, I think, to get a camera with at least 18 megapixels, not because I'm a fan of so many megapixels, but because the sensor developments, I think, justify the price. Starting with the T8i, the 500D, Canon introduced video. You can see that you can now shoot 1080p 20 FPS video, which is just a kind of a disappointing frames per second considering movies are 24 or 25. So that's a bit of a funny video resolution. Like you can shoot 720p 30 FPS, but the 1080p at 20 FPS is just a bit sad. So I would say if you're only doing still photography, no video at all, okay, no video at all, and you just want the cheapest possible, a bang for your buck Rebel, I think the T8i is a good one to consider on the used market. 15 megapixels, which is, definitely good enough. All these cameras are quite similar in terms of weight. They're all about, 450 to 550 grams, which is about a pound. They all have very similar battery life, although, the recent models, battery technology has improved. And the very, very latest models, the battery life has gone absolutely insane, but we'll talk about that in a bit. The FPS, or the frames per second, isn't going to really impress you on any of them, except again for the latest T8i, which we'll get to at the end. Okay, the T3i is the one, I highlighted it in orange here, you can see. The T3i is the one I would get if you're interested in doing video and you want to do video on a budget and save some money for lenses and stuff like that, which is pretty important. So you can find these used for about 200 bucks. Really, really popular model from 2011. 18 megapixel sensor, nice sensor. Has an articulated screen. Okay, so the screen that tilty flippy screens as they call them. High resolution screen, and actually shoots 1080p 30 FPS video and has a microphone jack. So it's pretty much the beginner video DSLR to buy. Though I would say for video, if your focus is video and still photography is secondary, then maybe you should consider a mirrorless camera. But nevertheless, if your primary focus is photography and you want to do some video on the side, T3i, great value for money, 200 bucks used. You don't need to spend that much money. Save your money for lenses. Okay, then Canon pumped out a lot of them. So 2000 to 2015 was like the heyday of budget DSLRs. They were just flying off the shelves, and Canon just kept pumping them out. And so here we have a bunch of models, T3, T4i, T5, T5i. You notice that the difference between the non-I and the I models is the I models have an articulated screen and a microphone jack, so they're pretty much designed for video purposes. So they generally have just slightly beefier technology in them. Canon puts in a little bit more effort into them. They're the ones that have the 3 digits before the D, so 600D, 650D, 700D, that kind of thing. Fundamentally, guys, they're not going to be all that different until you get to the T6i, which uses a 24 megapixel sensor. So again, as I said, anytime you see a megapixel change, that's a new sensor. Now, I don't get excited about the megapixels because you can print very large photos with even 18 megapixels, no problem. But that newer sensor is going to give you slightly better low light performance, just better focusing performance in general. You'll notice that the model numbers, some of them have an asterisk next to them, and those are the ones for which you can download this special Magic Lantern software. Long story short, it's this kind of software you can download and put into your camera to kind of hack it, to unlock all these software features that Canon basically locked you out of. So it's not something Canon endorses. It's absolutely optional. You don't really need to use it, but it's kind of cool that it's there. Greatly extends the capabilities of your camera. The latest ones that are available are the T7, T7i, T8i. I personally think they're overpriced because these cameras are super cheap to make. Canon has just been manufacturing tens of millions of them. They have it down to a science. There's so much competition these days at the low end that I wouldn't be comfortable paying more than $500. Today's prices, T7i is $800, T8i is $900. Now these are very capable cameras. For example, if we go all the way to the bottom, look at the most recent one, the T8i, this year's camera. It's been kind of tough to get it because there were some supply delays. 7.5 frames per second, which, you know what, is pretty crazy for which is supposed to be a lower end camera. A 7.5 is a very respectable frame rate. 45 autofocus points, again, very respectable. Has dual pixel autofocus, which is great for video. Articulated screen, touch screen, high resolution touch screen, and shoots 4K, 25 FPS video, and has a mic jack. So if you really like your DSLRs, you like that form factor, then maybe this is the one to go for. But I have to say that for $900, you can get a whole lot of camera if you go outside the Rebel line, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. Now I wanted to talk about these three cameras here. Right before the T8i, we have the 100D, 200D, 250D, which is the Rebel SL1, SL2, and SL3 respectively. Now these are even tinier. They're lighter than the regular Canon DSLRs. They're absolutely petite. You really have to try these in a store. You can absolutely use with one hand because they're so light. The image quality is actually quite impressive on them. And I think the line really peaked at the SL2. I mean, obviously the SL3 is better, but I don't think it's that much better to justify the increased price. So the Rebel SL2, Canon kind of perfected this little camera design, and I've highlighted it here because that's the one I would personally go for. Buy them for $350 used. Shoots 1080p 60 FPS video, which is nice resolution. 5 frames per second, 9 autofocus points. Articulated screen, newer 24 megapixel sensor. What's not to love? 650 is a lot of battery life for the money. I don't think the new $600 one is worth it personally. You really have to try these cameras out in the store and try playing around with the Rebel bodies. They all handle more or less the same. Ergonomics have been getting slightly better and better over time, but it's not going to be too radically different. So if you're comfortable with the Canon grip and the design, this line of cameras may be for you. Now, what I wanted to say earlier is that if you're considering something like the T7i or the T8i and you're willing to drop $800, $900, you really should take a good hard look at the newer mirrorless line. So they use a slightly different lens mount. It's called the EFM. So the lenses are not going to be compatible between your old DSLRs and these EFM lens mount cameras, although you can absolutely buy an adapter and adapt EF lenses to these cameras. Okay, so out of the box they won't be compatible, but with a relatively cheap adapter, all your old lenses will work just fine. But the M50, for example, is the camera on the left. It's been Japan's best-selling mirrorless camera for a while now, I believe. And we have the M6 on the right. Now the M50, as of this video, you can buy for $650 with that 15 to 45 millimeter EFM lens, which is an absolutely great vlogging lens. This is a mirrorless camera, so it's using a lot of the newer technology, an electronic viewfinder. This is like the vlogger's camera of choice, okay, the Canon M50. So that's the one I would personally steer you towards. If you're willing to drop more than $500 on a digital Rebel, I would say strongly consider the M50. But yeah, just going back to the table here, I will share a Google Doc of this table if you guys want, so you can quickly browse and sort, and there's some additional columns you may be interested in. I hope this was useful to you. If you have any questions, let us know in the comments. Myself or someone else would love to help you make the right camera decision. Lenses are always very important. As always, I like to harp on about lenses. Save half of your budget for lenses. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.